So on number 4, even though it's the first part of the worksheet and it should be really easy to do, it's just this 4 is throwing us off because we know that to complete the square, you want to get rid of the a value. You want to make it 1. But in this case, we know that all of these trinomials on the first section of this homework, all of them are already perfect square trinomials. And if they're perfect square trinomials, that means that you'll be able to write them as a binomial squared. So because of that fact, because you know that these are already perfect square trinomials, you could think of what value belongs right here. If this is 4x squared, that'd be like thinking of the square root of the first term. That would be 2x. And if you think of the square root of the last term, that would be a 1. And if you think about the signs, well, if the middle term is negative and the last term is positive, then this must be a minus sign right there. So this is your new binomial squared equation. I originally thought about eliminating this one because the a value is not 1. So it kind of defeats the purpose. But since we know that it's a perfect square trinomial, the whole purpose of having a perfect square trinomial is to be able to write it as a binomial squared. So you could continue your solving by square rooting and square rooting. You'll have 2x minus 1 equals plus or minus 3. And you add 1, you'll get 2x equals 1 plus or minus 3. And then you divide by 2 and divide by 2. So you get your answer, which is right there. It's x equals 1 plus or minus 3 over 2. Now that could be solved even further. 1 plus 3 over 2, and also 1 minus 3 over 2. So you get 4 over 2, and you get negative 2 over 2. So up here you get 2, and down here you get negative 1. So those are your 2 answers for that problem. But I don't even think they wanted you to solve that, right? In this first section, all they want, or do they? I guess they do want you to solve. Yeah, it says solve. Okay. So you would have to go through all that. So once again, the reason why I kind of don't like this, not because it's difficult, but because this a value is not 1. And usually, what I want you to memorize is to do completing the square, you need to make your a value 1. That would throw everything off. It would make it a lot more challenging. You could divide everything by 4 and do the completing the square method, but that defeats the purpose. This first part of the worksheet is just so you could get comfortable by setting up your binomial squared situation, right? Any one of these should be set up as a binomial squared. So the x is right there. How do you get this missing value in here? You take half of this, which is minus 3. And that's how you set it up, right? You always take half of b. But that's only if it's a perfect square quadratic trinomial. All of these are perfect square quadratic trinomials. So what belongs right here with the x? 6, right? Again, that's only because this is a perfect square quadratic trinomial. Now, sometimes you're not going to have a perfect square quadratic trinomial. So that's why the second part of this worksheet is to practice finding this perfect c value. That's the whole purpose of the second part of the worksheet. So you could find this c value so you could create a perfect square quadratic trinomial. And why do you want a perfect square quadratic trinomial? So ultimately you could do this and then apply the square root. But on this second section, all you're doing is practicing finding that perfect c value. And the notes would be c equals your b value divided by 2 and then squared. That's how you get your perfect c value. So you'd have to take 5, divide it by 2, and then square it. Don't get confused. Just simply write 5 halves times 5 halves, and you get 25 fourths. And that's your perfect c value. Now, once you have your perfect c value, you could plug it into this spot right here and you'll have a perfect square quadratic trinomial. And why do you want this perfect C value right here? Because then, once you have that perfect trinomial, you'll be able to write it as a binomial squared with the x right here. And what belongs in here with the x? Half of b, which would simply be 5 divided by 2. So on this section, all you're doing is finding the C value and also writing it as a binomial squared. Now the last section is the build up to everything, right? So everything before the last section has been building up to it. Over here, you are practicing writing your binomial squared. Over here, you are practicing finding your C value and then writing it as your binomial squared. Down here, you're actually doing everything, right? You want to do the complete method of completing the square. So pick one. 17? Didn't we explain that on the video yesterday? No? You sure? Okay, so number 17, let's do this. Step 1, if you look at your notes, step 1 is to make sure your A value is 1. Is it 1? Yes. And then also make space for your new perfect C value. So, timeout. Let's say you're taking the final exam and you're trying to do this. Completing the square method would be a horrible mistake to do, because completing the square method takes a long time. I just looked at this and I'm like, wait a minute, I could do this the old way. What times what is -6, that if I add together is +1. Plus 3, -2. And then you could use that old method that we've done before, zero product property. Something times something equals 0. That means that the first something could equal 0, or the second something could equal 0. And this is where you get your two simple equations and you solve both. And you get your two answers, x equals -3 and x equals +2. Super easy, right? Now let's say you're bored on a Saturday night, all alone. Then yeah, of course, complete the square. It's fun. It'll take some time. That was a joke. All right. Which other one? $21? Didn't we explain that on the video yesterday? Jumping to 21, is the A value 1? So step 1 is kind of done for us. All I need to do is make space for my new C value. Now if you did try to factor what times what is -6, that if you add together is 3, it doesn't work. So of course you need this method, because factoring, splitting, and solving doesn't always work, like on the previous question. So right here you need to solve using other methods. I'm going to complete the square here. So I'm going to add 6, so I'll have x squared plus 3x blank spot equals 6 blank spot. So then I need to find my perfect C value. And as you can see right here, my perfect C value will be b divided by 2 squared. So we're going to take the b value, divide it by 2, and then square it. So I will have 3 divided by 2 squared. A lot of people get freaked out with 3 over 2 squared. It's simply writing it twice and multiplying it. So you really have 3/2 times 3/2. That's really going to be 9/4. Are you with me? Ladies and gentlemen, right here, and all this work right here in blue, all we did was find the perfect C value that we're going to add right here, plus 9/4 and plus 9/4.
Also, we have to multiply the bottom too.
So a lot of people get stuck right here. Remember, this is now a perfect trinomial, perfect square trinomial. What's the purpose of that? The only reason why we want to come up with the perfect C value is to get it to be a perfect trinomial, to be able to do this. Right? That's the whole purpose of it, to have an x and a number right here. Now, what is this number? Where does it come from? This number is simply what? half of b. You guys see how this is 3 right here? What number is this going to be? Plus 3 halves. 3 halves is really just half of 3. Now, what if this would have been a 5? What would this be? 5 over 2, right? What if this would have been a 9? What would this be? 9 over 2. What if this would have been a negative 4? What would this be? That would be a negative 2 because you could actually divide, right? Okay, so when you get your perfect trinomial and then you do binomial squared, it's always x and then half of b. Now over here on this side, I've been doing common denominators to combine, but I see a lot of people get confused with that. So go ahead and just put these together. Go ahead and write it as 6 and 9/4. To get like 6 plus 9/4 is simply 6 and 9/4. But we don't want a mixed fraction, so what we're going to do is change it to improper. The 6 and 9/4, we're going to change it by going 4 times 6 plus 9. So 4 times 6 plus 9, that'd be 33, correct? Yes? So what do we really have on the right side? We have 33 over 4. Now on the left side, I'm just going to bring it down, x plus 3 halves squared. And then I am going to square root here, square root there. I'm going to have, let me zoom out a little to have more space. I'm going to have x plus 3 halves equals plus or minus. Now I might as well split the root, 33 up on top and the square root of 4 on the bottom. Now I also need to subtract 3 halves to get x by itself and subtract 3 halves over here. Now we know we can't actually subtract it, we're just going to rewrite it. So my answer is going to be, let me write it a little bit over here on the side. It's going to be x equals negative 3 over 2 plus or minus. The square root of 33 actually stays the square root of 33 because 3 times 11 doesn't help us. So we leave it the square root of 33. And then down there at the bottom we have a 2 because the square root of 4 is 2. That's a great answer. Now if you're taking a multiple choice test, sometimes the computer might put this together. If you have 2 separate fractions with the same denominator, sometimes they put them together as one single denominator with both numerators up on top. Negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 33. So this is also another possible answer, especially on a multiple choice test. Either one's good. Record this. If you do all this work right here, whoops. If you go through and do all this work for this one problem and you check your answer in the back and it's right, it's actually a great feeling. No lie. We'll answer any other questions on another video.